Hello, everybody. I'm Lori Jo Vest with Pop Speed Digital Marketing, and it's 10 on Tuesday, time for Pop Speed Digital's Hot Take Tuesday. So, we want to talk about things that are happening in the world of digital marketing and social media. So, today we have seen in more than one source, particularly Hootsuite and Gary Vaynerchuk's book. What's the book called? It's
Day
called Day
trading
Trading
attention.
Attention. And what they talk about is that brands should release their hold on the limitations that following brand guidelines can impose. What does that mean? That means that brands and companies, organizations, maybe even individuals, should not be afraid to, what Kylie said earlier, I'm going to steal your phrase, to color outside the lines when it comes to your brand guidelines and what your brand looks like on social, and consider varying it to fit into the trends that are happening online or to make an impact. So Kylie, what are we going to talk about today?
So we're going to talk a little bit about, to follow brand guidelines or not to, right? So that's, as Lori said, we've seen a couple sources lately say that, your brand guidelines matter, which we're going to talk about why they matter. It feels very obvious. Of course, you want to stick to your brand guidelines, but we're seeing more and more frequently that experts are saying how much do they matter. So we're going to go into a couple of examples of brands recently that have kind of like Lori said, colored outside the lines a little bit and strayed from those brand guidelines in ways that seem pretty effective. That in our eyes have worked, and whether that's in trend jacking or rebranding or stepping outside what people expect from those brands, kind
Mhm.
of going over, your brand guidelines matter, you want to follow them, but if other people are stepping outside them and it's working, let's talk about how that works and how to do it moving forward. Especially because there's no better time to kind of rethink your digital marketing strategy than a new year,
Yes.
which is coming up here very quick. And then we're going to wrap it up by talking about what the balance between these two looks like, following your brand guidelines and taking some risks outside of them,
Mhm.
how to keep everything cohesive while still taking those chances.
Absolutely. All right. So, brand guidelines matter. One of the things that we've been saying forever in the marketing world is that people should recognize your content based on what your brand normally looks like. And that means, of course, the colors you use, the icons you use, the font you use, the logo, the colors from the logo. I've seen brand guidelines books that show the types of photos you're allowed to use. There's a lot to it. Kylie, what would you like to add?
I think recognizability is so important, as you said. Being consistent with your, whether it's fonts, images, the people that you use in your social, all of those things. It's so important because if your audience doesn't know what they're looking at, it's very possible that they're going to continue to scroll. Right?
Yep.
We've talked about that so many times. So finding that color wheel, finding the icons, fonts, imagery that your audience responds to, all of those things are super important, and they help build not just recognizability but loyalty, because the second that people recognize you instantly, they know what to look for and they're going to keep coming back and hopefully engaging with you if they're enjoying what you're presenting in the digital space and on social mostly. So
Hmm.
your brand guidelines tell the story of your brand in a public digital space, and that's so important. But as we know we're talking about today, taking some risks, and Jaguar is an excellent example of that. I know Lori's more of a car person than I am, so she
Yeah,
has a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
thoughts on this. But if you've been paying attention in the digital space, Jaguar recently did just the craziest, most seemingly random, like, rebrand that we've seen in such a long time. And I think it literally came, Lori, the day that we either read this or saw it
Yeah.
in Hootsuite's 2025 trends webinar, that, oh yeah, like, take some steps away from your brand. It'll get you more attention. It'll do this. And all of a sudden we have a new Jaguar commercial that were like, is this a car brand? What's going on? So it was very
Yeah,
interesting.
it's really so much like a fashion brand, and
Yeah.
just bright colors and unique hairstyles, and the people were very somber, and I mean just a really interesting approach. I know you've seen it. If you're one of those
Mhm.
people that hasn't seen it, look it up. It
Yeah.
is absolutely, to me, an amazing example of jumping outside of your traditional staid branding and creating something that everybody's talking about. They might love it, they might hate it, but
Mhm.
everybody's talking about Jaguar. They
Mhm.
hadn't been in the past. There hasn't been that type of a cultural conversation involving this brand in quite a while. So it was really interesting to see. It is a rebranding. So they're rebranding. To me, it looked like in the era of social media and digital marketing, they're rebranding in a way that gets a ton of attention in the space because of how different, unique, how colorful, how stunning it was. I absolutely loved it. Some people hated it. I loved it.
I think one of the things about them too, speaking back to Jaguar, is you'll hear Lori and I, whether, I mean, this, we've been saying this for years. It feels like that bright, vibrant, radiant colors get attention. And it seems
Mhm.
like that simple of a theory is something that they really clung on to in this rebrand. And as Lori said, whether you loved it or you hated it, it got a lot of attention pretty
Yeah.
quickly. So it was
Yeah, it
very
was a
interesting.
conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then the
All right.
next one, bratwurst. I thought this was so funny. If
This
you
was cute.
remember, right, back to the summer, Charlie XCX put out her Brat album. Everybody's talking about Brat Summer. That really, really bright green and just the word brat was the album cover. And you saw so many brands jump on this trend, just like Bratwurst did here, kind of taking that simple graphic just with the word brat and turning it into something that's relevant for the
Yeah.
brand. I don't know about you, but I do not know very many brands whose, go-to fonts are this particular one, or go-to colors are just a very vibrant bright green and black. Like you
Yeah.
don't see it very often, but you saw a ton of people jumping on this trend and throwing these colors and this font into their feed and making it work. And it was
Yeah.
one of those things where, you jumped on it and it's instantly recognizable. You're paying attention, you're involved in what's going on pop culturally and in the social sphere. And if it's good for brands that just don't resonate with it to kind of keep their distance from things like this.
Yes.
But if it's your audience that has relation with this generation or this type of trend, and you missed out on this, you missed out on it,
Yeah, you did. You did.
so I think this was a great example of jumping on things that maybe don't meet your brand guidelines or colors or fonts or icons or whatever, but kind of inserting yourself into that trend
Yeah.
worked for a lot of people and got really solid engagement and told a lot of younger audience members, oh yeah, like we're listening and we're hearing you.
We're paying attention. And it
Exactly.
did, to me, being somebody who's not necessarily in that Charlie XCX fan base, it's a huge fan base. It's a young fan base. And it could help a brand give themselves a little more credibility to that audience by
Exactly. Yeah.
sharing something that was related to this trend, that says, "Yeah, we get you." And it's a
Mhm.
subtle message, but it is there. So the name
Exactly.
of the game is what, Kylie?
It's a balancing act.
Yes.
So you will never, ever, ever, unless the entire, stratosphere of social media and digital marketing completely changes, hear us telling you to fully abandon your brand guidelines.
Yep.
We'll never
Never.
say it, I hope, because, it adds not only how we talked about brand recognizability and loyalty, but it just adds, a level of cohesiveness to what's
Yes.
going on, what you're presenting, and organization a little bit too. So it keeps you recognizable, but it also keeps your audience engaged with whatever it is you're trying to sell or achieve or call to for your audience.
Right.
So we've talked a lot about Sandcastles, our grief support nonprofit client, and so for them, there's certain things that, are trending that make sense. And a lot of those things remain in, a grief space, or, when bad things happen, jumping on those, not trends, but jumping on cultural happenings, and, providing resources and things like that.
Mhm.
There's a level of what's appropriate and what's not, as things like this tend to come out. Um,
Mhm.
and it's really important to stay true to your brand. So if it would have never been appropriate for us, working with Sandcastles, to jump on the Brat Summer trend.
No.
So we didn't.
Right.
Keeping in mind that there are things like that where it might be, you might have an idea and you might want to talk it through, but ultimately being able to say no to certain
Mhm.
things and staying true to your brand is very important. So I think that finding that balance of staying true, but then coloring outside those lines, is where
Mhm.
that sweet spot really falls. And a lot of people don't get it right.
Yes. I'll tell you a little story of someone not getting it right. It's from a while ago.
It is.
I did work on a global brand at one of the bigger ad agencies for about 6, 7 years, and they had a social team internally on the client side, and we were doing things like trend jacking. It was the kind of brand that was appropriate to do this, but it was trend jacking on movies coming out and things like that. And this internal social team would get so excited, but their execution was very poor. And in these situations, if you are jumping on a trend, execution is everything. Because what happened when this internal social team got really excited, but they weren't designers, producers, writers, they created some content that the client let go out and it fell flat. Nobody knew what it was. It didn't identify closely enough with the movie it was supposed to be jumping on, and it didn't work. So, one of the things to pay attention to is if you're considering stepping outside your brand guidelines, get some professional help. And I don't mean a therapist. Get a marketing team. Have a marketing team that can help you determine if it truly is the right thing for you to do. And if you're going to jump on it, how are you going to jump on it so it doesn't detract from your brand? So that's one of the most important things to remember is if you can't execute that trend jacking content in a way that is truly going to land with your consumers, don't do it.
Hmm.
That's part of the balancing act is deciding when it's a no. We don't have the
Yeah.
resources, we won't be able to get approval from legal in time. You don't want to be
Hmm.
late to a trend, you don't want to be flat on a trend. So
Absolutely.
there's some really interesting things that happen on the backside, back behind the scenes when you see really good trend jacking content come out. It's been thought out, it's been designed and planned and strategized so that it lands with the consumers. So be
Absolutely.
careful, but don't be afraid. Just make
Yeah.
sure that you're executing at a level that will your customers
Hmm.
will see and understand. So basically, that's what we've got for you today. If you are interested in learning more about us, we have a website at popspeeddigital.com. And Kylie and I are also open networkers here on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with us. We always offer a half-hour audit of your social media where we can go through and just spend a half hour with you on a Zoom call and kind of go through what you're currently doing and let you know what kind of things we could do to improve it. So we're here
Hmm.
for you. Would love to hear from you. So reach out, and that's what we have for you today. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye, everybody.